You run a business, but it doesn't seem like things are meshing all that well. I mean, finance doesn't talk to human resources very much, and you'd think they might because human resources is the whole thing. People are the greatest asset in your business, and we wanted to talk about something really critical, I think, today in today's business world regarding HR and finance. I have with me Kim Hoover, and he is with a company called HCMoneyball, and he is in the business of getting HR and finance to talk to each other, basically maximizing the ROI and human capital, if you want to put it that way. Hello, Kim.
Hi, Chris.
Welcome to the show. Good
Well,
to
hey,
have you.
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sure. By the way, we will be taking questions. If you have any questions in regards to what we're saying, just throw them up in the comments, and we'll go from there. HR and finance. Now, traditionally, Kim, they don't talk very much to each other. I mean, in any general business, they just don't mesh well, do they?
Well, it's interesting, and you're correct. And you'll hear every business say people are our most important asset. HR has been tasked with managing that asset, over the years. But there's been a real shift in the valuation of companies that has really driven the conversation around this topic of human capital. Human capital being, the economic value that employees bring to the company. And as you said, the foundation or the driver for value creation. The shift over the last 35 to 40 years, though, around human capital has been significant. In the 1970s, 75, when we valued the S&P 500, we would say that about 10% of the value of a corporation was in intangible assets, things like goodwill, things like human capital.
Right.
As of 2020, we would say that 90% of the valuation of the Fortune 500 is in intangible assets. And if you look at an organization, what is the largest intangible asset? It's going to be the human capital. It's going to be the employee asset.
Mm-hmm.
For many companies, the cost of employee is the largest single line item. And for many companies, particularly service companies, 70 to 80% of their operating expense is the investment in people. So it has really brought the conversation around the value of your employees, saying that our most important asset is our employees. Well, now with that valuation, people are looking to that as a primary driver, investors, all stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So they basically, companies are, you think, recognizing the need to keep people happy. I mean, really, really, that's kind of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So great point. I mean, it's interesting because when we get into people, companies, and again, the material impact of human capital on performance has become a topic for the globally. ISO has put out a standard on it. The SEC has now put regulations in place, and we expect to see that continue. But you make a perfect point, like keeping employees happy. The question around the financial side of the house and the HR side of the house, managing this it's become more complex to manage.
Mm-hmm.
We used to think a day's pay for a day's work. That was it, right? And maybe I go back far enough that made sense when I first went to work. Mm-hmm. But the world has really changed, and if for no other reason, the pandemic has actually magnified the degree to which the dependence on employees drives value. But then on top of that, the employee has become a stakeholder. Not just an employee, but a stakeholder in the value of a company.
Right.
And so the HR department is tasked with kind of three phases of managing that, right? You acquire employees. And when you think about all the things you read, wanting the right people in the right seat on the bus, wanting to get the highest quality employees we can, all those things really speak to productivity, which speaks to revenue. And then when you talk about management of your employees, it's all of those aspects. It's the benefits. it's vacation time, it's work-life balance, it's flexibility in the workplace, remote workplace. All those things affect the employee. And then the last piece is, of course, optimizing that. Now, the interesting thing about human capital is you can buy it, but you can't own it. Right? In other words, employees have a choice of where they work, and that with the kind of social consciousness we see, a lot of it driven by the internet, the ESG focus of many organizations.
ESG.
There's ESG, environmental safety and governance, or environmental, social, and governance.
Right.
Is another aspect of these. Are all these different organizations are looking at the things an organization needs to do. What makes an organization to be at what allows them to be in a position where they keep their employees happy. And so in doing so, there's a lot of things that organizations have to address. And these things historically have been in HR. They're in HR today. But with evaluation, the importance of this this asset on your performance is starting to now create interest, raise issues for the CEO, for the CFO in the boardroom, so that all parties in an organization are starting to look at this. And so what we do and what a lot of people are doing is working on ways to facilitate that dialogue across an organization.
I see.
From the standpoint of HCMoneyball, we took our name from the Oakland A and the Billy Bean experiment that brought analytics to baseball, right? And now to all sports. But as we viewed it, the fundamental challenge there was you have a limited budget and you try to get the maximum capability, optimize your team so that you can achieve your objectives. For a business, you have a limited budget. It's not unlimited. You want to bring in your employees and you want to optimize your employees. You want your employees to be happy because happy employees are more productive. You want your employees to feel that they're being treated fairly. You want your employees to trust their management. These are all areas that we know can help make employees more productive. And now we've also have research that indicates that a diverse organization can be more productive. So there's a lot of drivers out there to achieve this. But the question starts with this: I have a limited budget.
Limited budget.
And so you have to make the best decisions on what are the drivers. In our platform, we look at financial results. We bring data in from standard financials, publicly available financials that are representative of the company. And then we bring in a lot of information on the employee side, things like employee costs, benefits, retirement costs, etc., mobility, the ability to, the mobility within an organization, recruitment, turnover. These are all aspects, but these are programs. And so what we look at is the programs that are being put in place by HR to achieve the objectives of acquiring the right resources, managing those resources effectively, keeping them engaged. Engagement is a big driver of productivity, and then maximizing them through investments in training, etc. But at the same time, see the investments in those programs measured against the results of the organization. And that's where you've heard me talk about HCROI, human capital return on investment. So that's a primary measure of the return you get for every dollar you invest in people across that whole process. Your total cost of workforce looked at in terms of the cost of that workforce and the return on that workforce. So that can be $1.50 per dollar spent. In some organizations, it's $7 per dollar spent. So that's what we do. We provide analytics that allow you to track those investments, those expenses that you have, and the return you're getting on the net of those expenses within your organization.
HR has to get, it's their job to get the right people in the organization to fill the positions that are needed and get the tasks done that need to be done. You need the correct people. And once you have that correct person in there, how, and I'm approaching this from a basic, layman's viewpoint, I suppose, on this subject. But how does finance get involved? Give them a raise, make sure they get raises once in a while. I mean, I'm approaching this from a basic.
No, it's a good question. So finance, from the finance perspective, ROI is a standard measure. When we buy a piece of equipment, the question is, what are we going to get back in return for that investment? And if it's going to be positive, then it's a good investment. And if it's going to be negative, it's not such a good investment.
No.
And so when we talk about these programs, let's just take an example. Let's say that you had high turnover and you were able to determine that your cost of turnover was eroding your profitability. So then the question becomes, well, what do we do about that? How do we reduce turnover? Do we need to invest in recruiting to get the right people in the door? Do we need to invest in training so that people feel that their careers are evolving and that mobility? Do we need to invest in benefits? Are people leaving because they feel that their benefits are not as the benefits that we're providing are not as attractive as the benefits of potential competitors? So finance has to make decisions. And so we talk about this dialogue between the two organizations.
That's the thing, dialogue. Get them to talk.
Get them to talk.
Hey,
and so,
hey, get down here.
What we're trying to do is provide a standardized set of measures that look at the productivity of the employees and look at these programs so that HR can actually present the case that of the things that we could invest in, we believe that training is the right one and will produce the greatest return and can help us address that turnover issue. Now, it's a complex model, obviously. And that's why we focus at the program level. Every individual is a unique case within an organization.
Sure.
But the programs that you apply are selected and invested in to have an impact. And then you want to see that impact. And you want to see that in a set of correlations. If we decide that we're going to reduce turnover, which will reduce our replacement costs by investing in training, and we take that action, if it's effective, we'll see the impact on lower turnover, potentially higher revenue per employee, and lower expense in terms of recruiting. So it's not often one thing, it's the connection between several things. And that's the challenge that HR has. There's a lot of internal analytics that HR uses, and there's a lot of internal information that they gather to help make that recommendation and make that decision. We believe that on the finance side, what finance wants to see is that in terms of kind of a financial analysis and then see the result of that. And that's really the missing piece from our perspective, the ability to quantify the productivity of your workforce and then monitor that productivity and these other key factors in correlation to what HR is doing and promoting on that side. So we believe that it helps build a bridge, if you will, of a common, repeatable, standard set of measures, and that's what's key. In a way, you create a baseline of what your human capital return on investment is, and some people don't, some people have kind of an issue or an aversion to talking about people in terms of human capital, right? Because there's a sense that this doesn't, this dehumanizes your workforce. But the fact of the matter is that as a stakeholder, the workforce, the workers are in a sense flexing their muscles now, right?
Yeah.
We're going through this thing called the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
And
Oh, hey, give us your take on the Great Resignation.
well, what is the Great Resignation? It's the workforce reassessing what's important to them. And you have organizations, I saw a thing just recently from Amazon that they're having trouble with deliveries because they're still having trouble hiring people, right? And we're in a situation now where there's more demand for workers than there are workers, but there are more workers choosing not to work while we go through this reassessment. A lot of this has been accelerated, to light speed by the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
The whole concept of flexibility and remote working was something that naturally would have happened over 15 to 20 years, but it happened in 6 months.
It got accelerated big time.
Got accelerated. So everybody's adjusting to that. And so some people would say, well, how do we deal with that going forward? Is this a good time to create your baseline? My view is this is the perfect time to create your baseline. It's the perfect time to bring in a set of measures. And this platform that we've built, HCMetrix, is geared to do that. It's not geared to do everything or take on the challenges and the issues that the HR community has, nor is it there to solve all the problems for the CFO. But what it does is it brings the workforce, your human capital, to the table at the same level that you already apply to things like manufacturing and distribution and marketing and sales. And it allows us to bring a set of quantifiable measures together that everybody can sit around the table and talk about. And again, keep in mind that everybody has a limited budget. So you have to make the best decisions you can while you're still, able to drive productivity, see positive results, and maintain a business in a sustainable fashion.
So one of the HR trends that you're talking about, I was looking at your website earlier. You said something about HR trends, and one of those would be the Great Resignation, right? That's
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
So and so, does the finance side of it take a look at that trend and say, how can we combat this? I guess the simple answer would be, yeah, give them more money. I guess I don't know, but I know with limited budgets and everything, so it's a fine line, and there has to be, I'm guessing, constant dialogue through the whole thing.
I think you've characterized it perfectly. It's a balance, right? For a business to be in business, you have to maintain a balance, and it's why it makes this analysis and using these analytics to see what's actually happening. I call kind of the first set of analytics we apply your corporate human capital selfie. In other words, these are hard fact numbers. These are actual costs. These are actual ratios, rates of hiring, turnover, recruiting, mobility, demographics. These are all quantity numbers that are pulled from your HR system and your finance system. So it does create a reflection. You're looking at exactly how your company is performing in terms of its human capital. And you can look at that every month as this data is updated. And then you can decide where your priorities are. You can work on them and you can see, and some of it is, look, for some organizations, there'll be a little bit of trial and error, but the value of the analytics is that something is working sooner rather than after 12 months. You'll know after 3 months if it's having an impact.
Well, 3 months is better than 12. Yeah, for sure. Have you gone into companies and just seen what you describe as a complete disaster, a disaster waiting to happen or something, and used your analytics, your expertise, I could say, in basically helping to fix things?
Well, I can show you. There's a good place to look at this that is like a microcosm to any business. Our CEO, Solange Shiraz, has been in this space for almost 30 years.
Okay.
And she's applied this exact same methodology in the M&A space, which kind of condenses it. In other words, you're looking at an organization to acquire, and you want to understand the sustainability of that organization. It's magnified in the M&A space because so many, so we know from a track record perspective, very, very few or a small percentage of those transactions produce the results that were projected. And a large part of that has been because of a misunderstanding of exactly where the human capital was, what the workforce dynamic was, and where there was opportunity. So in many cases, actually in over 60 transactions, she was able to apply this and add significant value. We talked about adding value. Maybe a good statistic is that if your human capital expense, your investment in people represents 50 or more % of your operating costs,
Right.
then a 10% increase in your HCROI can have a 40% increase on EBITDA. So it's that significant because it's such a large piece of your investment. It's like any investment. If your largest investment in your retirement fund performs well, you'll get the biggest bang for the buck, right? You're going to see the biggest leverage there. Right. And so that's an important factor to keep in mind from the financial perspective. In the boardroom, from the CFO perspective, there is, as you said, in lots of organizations, there's opportunity to make smart investments in people and drive productivity, which drives up the sustainability and the value of an organization.
Should when somebody gets hired, now this is just something I thought of as you were talking. When an organization is looking to hire somebody to fill a position, do you think it might be wise to have a finance person in with the HR person during the interview? Maybe. I mean, I'm just bringing this up. I don't know if that's good or bad, but
I don't think that's necessary. I mean, HR is well positioned and well armed to understand the value of getting the right people in the right roles.
Sure.
One of the questions that comes up, but you raise a good point, right? The question will come up: who owns the responsibility for the company's human capital? Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is that it's everybody. Mm-hmm. The finance can provide the funding, approve the funding to go in certain areas. Right. But you'll see that on the HR side, you've got the hiring process. So you want to, so HR has a process, and oftentimes they include the hiring manager. What are you specifically looking for? There's many kind of qualification processes out there to make sure we're getting people who actually have the right skills, et cetera. So I think HR is fully equipped to do that.
Okay.
The thing is that in order to maximize even those processes, sometimes requires an investment, right? So you invest in maybe your recruiting partner, and in order to identify the right candidates, you want the right recruiting partner, and that recruiting partner might cost more than the one you have. Mm-hmm. So that's a financial decision to spend more with the objective of doing a better job of hiring the right people and driving productivity.
Balance. You have to make that decision. At some point, you might, and you may wait a while before you do it. I want to hit up on an earlier thing you mentioned regarding ESG. And the reason I bring it up is because I've done a lot of recent broadcasts and podcasts regarding ESG and the environment and all of that. So as you talk about it with regards to human capital, how does that concerns about ESG and environmental social governance play into your firm's services? Or I'm looking for the broad answer there, I guess. But.
Yeah. So the S in ESG is social, right? Mm-hmm. And this is really part of being a good citizen, right? That's another part of a company's goodwill and a company's sustainability is to be a good citizen. And that's why I say that the factors that are driving this are broader. So gender equity is a case, right? Diversity at the board level, the opportunities within organizations. So these are some of the measures that you'll see under the S, and the S under ESG. A lot of those point to human capital and your ability to manage your workforce in a way that's not only good for the company, but good for the individual and society. Our CEO, Solange, has this saying that companies that do good do well.
Mm-hmm.
And that falls in line with the whole concept of ESG, not only from the environmental and governance standpoint, but from the social standpoint as well. And again, maximizing your investment in people, investing in your organization, giving opportunity for diversity within your organization. These are also factors that drive productivity, but they require programs to execute.
Right. Wow. Did you see Kevin? Kevin is here.
Hey, Kevin. So Kevin and I are we're kind of attached at the hip on these topics, and Kevin is a great advocate of the need for the dialogue between HR and finance.
I will tell you that I recorded a podcast with him recently. It hasn't gone live yet, but at some point, and I'm going to invite Kevin in on this right now, have you both on at the same time. And I'll just sit there and listen to.
Well, you better schedule a lot of time.
Yeah, I'll just sit there and listen to all the wisdom. I'll just push a few buttons and let you guys.
Once we get going, there's
I'm sure. I mean, you have, and Kevin was just full of information and lots of insights and what I call sound bites. And he had a few of them, and you had a lot of them today yourself. So this dialogue is renewed. I mean, is this a renewed thing? This finance and HR thing, talking to each other? Is this a new concept, or is it just more in the spotlight now because of the? Well,
I think it's much more in the spotlight, and I would say right from the start, it's not due to lack of interest, and it's not due to I think an aversion. There's been, it's about, getting common ground. I think all parties, CEO, board members, everyone is looking for more information to make good decisions. And that's what HCMetrix is about. It's, it provides insight into these factors in a way that's quantified. Historically, the concept of, happiness, are our employees happy, has been maybe not quite tangible enough, for those who are financially minded, et cetera, and engagement and these types of things. But we're getting a handle on those things, and we're putting measures on those things. And organizations are starting to evaluate engagement. Our platform can use that valuation, and based on feedback from employees, we can bring in that data, and we can plot that against, performance as well.
We have a question, and I don't want to mispronounce her name. I'm going to say, do you know this person? Solange Charas? Did I say it right?
Yes. So I know Solange. I work for her.
Okay. What's really important, if it hasn't been addressed, HR people have to learn how to speak finance, really, and gain financial literacy. And she says our approach or solution helps the HR professional instantly understand how HR and HR programs impact the bottom line. So.
Right. And that's the foundation of, of the platform. So HCMetrix is straightforward to implement. And one of the things that we've been very focused on is, to bring a platform that facilitates, what Solange is saying here, that literacy is not as hard to acquire as people might have thought. The analytics present the information in a way that show correlations that when people see them, they're almost self-evident. And so, it wasn't required that you go get a degree in finance in order to understand the implications between the financial numbers and the dynamics of your HR workforce, the information you have in HR. It's really putting them together in a way that produces easy to use, easy to understand analytics that point to what is really impacting the return on your investment in people. And that's generally good for everyone. Getting a good return on investment is good for the employee. It's good for the stockholders. And when done correctly, it's good for the society as well when you're promoting things like diversity and inclusion.
On a basic sense, HR, say the HR manager, whoever that is, or head of HR, might want to take a day or half a day and go around and talk to everybody in the company that's working there and say, hello, how you doing? How's everything? How's the kids and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's a Gary V concept, I guess, but I kind of think that could play a part of it. But Kim, this has been a great discussion, and I'm sure we could go on for another 2 hours and not repeat anything. So I'm gonna kind of wrap it up here. I'm gonna have you back at some point. I think we'll get you and Kevin Rustici. Did I say it right?
Yes. Yes.
I said it wrong when I interviewed him the first time, and he's like, "I've been called everything." Anyway, I want to get you and Kevin on at the same time and have that discussion live, or however we got to do it. But you two talking, I think, would make for some great business related positivity type of content, and I think that would be great.
That'd be great. I keep in touch with Kevin. We're pinging each other all the time. So anytime he's ready, I'm ready.
Okay, good. I'll arrange it. Now, before we wrap it up, something completely unrelated, and I'm going to throw you for a loop. What's your favorite movie?
So
I had to do
now
it.
you forced me into a corner, and and I'm going to tell you what my favorite movie is, because when my family sees this, if I don't tell the truth, they'll call me on it.
Mm-hmm.
So my favorite movie of all time is Mary Poppins.
Oh, yeah. I love that one. I remember that. I'm old enough to remember that. Another question. If you had a time machine, like a Doctor Who TARDIS or a DeLorean from Back to the Future, and you were able to go back and visit with somebody who inspired you, who isn't around anymore, and you could do it with just one person, have a cup of coffee with them or just chat with them, who might you want to go back and see that isn't around anymore? Doesn't have to be anybody famous in a movie or something, but anybody.
Well, this is going to sound, maybe you'd get this answer a lot. From my perspective, I think one of the people that is most interesting to me in history is Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Because of the tremendously difficult decisions he had to make to hold this country together.
Right.
It just, and the way he weathered it, and the way he managed it. I mean, the way he lived that, I think is just maybe just one of the greatest, periods of history, most challenging and greatest periods of history to have met someone who mm-hmm. could see the future that that he was paying the price for. And it was a big price for him personally and for the country. Right. A tremendous price, but he paid that price for a future that, we now have the benefit of living in.
Kim Hoover from HCMoneyball, I believe it's an LLC, right?
Yes.
And talking about finance, HR, talking to each other, making things better for your greatest asset in your company, which is your people. And that's really what the bottom line is. And then maybe a lot more of that will reduce or put a dent in this great resignation,
No, absolutely. It's critical. It's important. The collaboration between those two pillars of an organization are the ones that can make a difference. It's going to take that kind of collaboration mm-hmm. to have an impact, make a difference, and define the future for the workforce going forward. So it'll affect all of us.
There you go. Kim Hoover, straight from the man. Now, I like to do this to everybody, the Leonard Nimoy thing. Live long and prosper, Kim.
Yeah, let's see. I'm not as good at that as you are.
Oh, look at that, though.
I'm trying.
Kevin, I think Kevin tried. I don't know. I can't remember if he got it or not. I'll have to go look at the podcast. Anyway, thank you, Kim. very much.
Chris, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.